Some mornings in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, people wake up and step outside to find their entire backyard wrapped in silk. Not a few cobwebs in the corner of a shed, entire fields, fence lines and paddocks blanketed in thick white sheets of spider silk, sometimes stretching for hundreds of meters, glittering with thousands upon thousands of tiny spiders, all moving across the surface at once. It looks like the ground itself has been mummified overnight. And the strange part is, it's not a one-off. It's happened again and again in this part of Australia, on a scale big enough that NASA satellite imagery has actually picked it up from space. Let's talk about what's actually going on, because the real explanation is honestly stranger and more impressive than most people expect. The spiders responsible are usually small, common species from a few different families, generally lumped together under the catch-all name money spiders, though several different species get involved depending on the year and location. On their own, any one of these spiders is tiny, harmless to humans, and completely unremarkable. The event that makes them famous has nothing to do with the spiders being dangerous. It's about what happens when millions of them all decide to do the exact same thing on the exact same night. Here's where it gets genuinely wild. This behavior is called ballooning. When conditions are right, usually right after flooding, when spiders that normally live at ground level suddenly find themselves stranded on rapidly shrinking dry patches, surrounded by rising water, huge numbers of them will climb to the highest point they can find, point their abdomen up into the air, and release a thread of silk into the breeze. As that silk thread catches the air current, it generates enough lift to carry the spider away entirely, sometimes for a few meters, sometimes for genuinely long distances, carried on rising thermal air currents. It's essentially a spider using static electricity and air pressure to fly without wings, using nothing but a single strand of silk as a sail. Under normal conditions, you might see a handful of spiders doing this on any given day, and nobody would ever notice. But after major flooding events in the Wagga Wagga region, and this part of New South Wales floods regularly enough that it's practically an annual risk, millions of spiders across a huge area can all end up triggering this same escape behavior within the same short window of time, all trying to flee rising water at once. When that many spiders launch themselves into the air within the same night, in the same general wind conditions, they don't scatter randomly. They tend to drift and land together, in huge numbers, on whatever high ground, fences or open fields happen to be downwind. And because each spider is trailing its own single strand of silk the entire time, when thousands of them land in roughly the same spot within hours of each other, all those individual threads combine into what looks, from a distance, like an entire landscape wrapped in gauze. Documented events like this have occurred in the Wagga Wagga region multiple times, notably following serious flooding in 2012 and again in following years, with local residents photographing entire paddocks, fence lines, and even power poles coated in thick, glittering webbing, stretching for what some witnesses estimated at hundreds of meters in a single connected sheet. The imagery is striking enough that it's circulated internationally, often misidentified online as some kind of horror movie hoax, when it's actually a completely real, if genuinely unsettling, natural response to flooding. Now here's the detail that tends to surprise people even more. This phenomenon isn't unique to Australia, and it isn't even new. Charles Darwin himself documented something remarkably similar during the voyage of the Beagle in the 1830s, describing threads of spider silk drifting through the air far out at sea, landing on the ship's rigging in numbers substantial enough that he wrote about it directly in his own notes. Ballooning spiders have been recorded landing on ships hundreds of kilometers from the nearest coastline, and modern radar and aircraft studies have detected huge numbers of tiny airborne spiders at altitudes of several thousand meters, caught in upper atmospheric wind currents entirely by accident, sometimes carried extraordinary distances from wherever they originally launched. So why does Wagga Wagga specifically keep making headlines for it, rather than somewhere else? Part of the answer is genuinely about geography and timing. The region sits on relatively flat floodplain country along the Murrumbidgee River, which means flooding here tends to happen gradually and cover an enormous surface area, rather than flash flooding through a narrow valley. That gives huge spider populations across a wide area the same simultaneous trigger, rising water, at effectively the same time, which is exactly the condition needed to produce a genuinely massive, synchronized ballooning event, rather than just a handful of scattered individual spiders doing their own thing on their own schedule. Combine that with a landscape of open farmland, fence lines, and low vegetation, which gives all that airborne silk plenty of exposed surfaces to land on and become visible, and you get exactly the kind of dramatic, photogenic, field-covering event that ends up making international news, rather than just disappearing quietly into a forest canopy somewhere unnoticed. Here's a detail that puts the scale of these events into real perspective. Researchers studying mass ballooning events elsewhere in the world have estimated that a single hectare of affected ground can sometimes host literally millions of individual spiders during a major synchronized dispersal event. Multiply that across the kind of area affected during a serious Wagga Wagga flood event, and you're looking at a genuinely staggering number of individual animals, all airborne within roughly the same window of time, purely as a survival response to rising water beneath them. And despite how it looks, this event is actually good news dressed up as a horror movie. The spiders aren't swarming aggressively, they're not dangerous to people or pets, and the mass ballooning event itself is a highly effective survival strategy that lets an entire local spider population escape a flood that would otherwise wipe most of them out. Within days, the silk sheets typically break down, dry out, and blow away, and the spiders that landed successfully disperse back into the local ecosystem to rebuild their population, which plays a genuinely useful role in controlling other insect numbers across the region's farmland. So what does all of this actually add up to? A completely real, well-documented, scientifically understood natural phenomenon, recorded by naturalists for close to 2 centuries, that just happens to look, on the morning after it occurs, like something out of a horror film. A regional flood response behavior so visually dramatic that satellite imagery and international news outlets have picked it up multiple times, purely because millions of small, harmless spiders all had exactly the same idea at exactly the same time for exactly the same reason. And a small stretch of floodplain in southern New South Wales that, purely by accident of geography and river behavior, keeps producing the most visually spectacular version of this event anywhere in the country. And maybe that's the real story here. Not a plague, not an invasion, just millions of very small, very determined animals doing the single smartest thing they possibly could when the ground disappeared beneath them, and leaving behind, completely by accident, one of the most genuinely eerie landscapes Australia has to offer.